Number 12. Reinhard Heydrich. They called him the Butcher of Prague, and yet his death triggered one of the most brutal Nazi massacres ever seen. But why? And how did a single man's ambition help seal the fate of millions? Reinhard Heydrich wasn't just another Nazi official. He was one of the key masterminds of the Holocaust, the man who chaired the infamous Wannsee Conference, where the final solution was formalized. Many historians argue that without Heydrich's cold efficiency, the Nazi death machine wouldn't have operated at such a terrifying scale. His rise to power was lightning fast. Hitler once described him as the man with the iron heart. However, his iron rule over occupied Czechoslovakia made him one of the most feared men in Europe. Locals whispered his name in terror. But here's where it gets even darker. After his assassination in Prague in 1942, Hitler's revenge wasn't limited to the suspects. Entire villages like Lidice were wiped off the map in retaliation. Men shot, women sent to concentration camps, children gassed. A legacy of death followed his footsteps, and that's what I'll tell you in just a second, because what happened next shocked even the Nazis. Number 11. Oskar Dirlewanger. Imagine a man so cruel that even other Nazis feared and despised him. That was Oskar Dirlewanger, a name still whispered in terror by historians today. But why was he considered too brutal for the SS? Dirlewanger led a special Nazi unit made up of convicted criminals tasked with crushing resistance movements in occupied territories. His brigade wasn't just a military force, it became a roving gang of sadists, known for torture and mass indiscriminate killings. One of his most famous acts was during the Warsaw Uprising, where his troops reportedly murdered over 30,000 civilians in just days, many burned alive. Some SS commanders begged to have Dirlewanger removed, calling him an animal. However, Hitler approved of his brutality, believing it necessary for quelling rebellion. And here's the twist. Even after the war, rumors swirled that Dirlewanger escaped justice, leading to wild theories about his mysterious death, or possible survival. If you stick with me, I'll reveal one theory that connects him to post-war mercenary networks. And by the way, his unit once used flamethrowers inside hospitals during an operation. Just think about that level of cruelty. Number 10. Leopold II of Belgium. He ruled a tiny European country, yet managed to control a territory 80 times its size. But what really happened in his private African empire? Leopold II didn't conquer the Congo for Belgium. He claimed it as his personal property. Under the disguise of philanthropy and civilizing missions, his agents turned the Congo into a forced labor hell. Villagers were ordered to collect wild rubber, and those who failed, their hands were chopped off as punishment. Yeah, chopped off. It's estimated that 10 million Congolese died under Leopold's regime from murder, starvation, and disease. Photos of mutilated children sent shockwaves across Europe when they surfaced. However, Leopold tried to silence critics by building lavish monuments in Brussels with the blood money. Ironically, statues of him still stand today, stirring protests. And here's something wild. He made so much personal profit from the Congo that by 1908, the Belgian government had to buy the Congo from him just to stop the atrocities. If you stick with me, I'll tell you how his hidden diaries revealed even darker ambitions he had planned, ones that never came to light in his lifetime. Number 9. Ivan the Terrible. He began as a brilliant reformer, yet ended his reign soaked in paranoia and blood. What pushed Ivan from visionary to merciless tyrant? Ivan IV of Russia, better known as Ivan the Terrible, started his rule by modernizing the Russian state and expanding its borders. But after the sudden death of his beloved wife Anastasia, something inside him snapped. So he created the Oprichnina, his personal secret police who rode black horses and terrorized the land with torture, executions, and confiscations. Entire cities were wiped out. One of the most chilling events was the massacre of Novgorod, where thousands of innocent citizens were tortured and killed over baseless accusations of treason. And in a fit of rage, Ivan even killed his own son, smashing his head with a staff. A painting by Ilya Repin famously immortalizes this terrifying moment. But wait, there's an eerie twist. Ivan once wrote to Queen Elizabeth I of England proposing marriage. Yes, Russia's bloodiest ruler almost became consort to the English crown. And if you stick around, I'll tell you how that proposal bizarrely backfired, changing European alliances forever. Number 8. Idi Amin. He called himself the last king of Scotland, but behind the theatrics was a brutal dictator whose reign left hundreds of thousands dead. How did a military officer turn Uganda into a nightmare? Idi Amin seized power in 1971 through a military coup, initially welcomed by many Ugandans, but his charm quickly gave way to terror. Amin expelled 60,000 Asians from Uganda, collapsing the economy overnight. He ordered the killings of political opponents, often personally overseeing tortures in secret prisons like Mikandai barracks. Victims' bodies were dumped into the Nile, feeding the crocodiles. Amin once joked about it. His paranoia spiraled. He claimed enemies were plotting supernatural attacks against him and surrounded himself with witch doctors. But here's what shocks historians. He kept severed heads of rivals in his fridge, showing them off to guests. Some estimates put his death toll at 300,000 people during his 8-year reign. And yet, despite these horrors, Amin fled into exile in Saudi Arabia, living comfortable until his death in 2003, never facing trial. If you stick with me, I'll reveal the secret deal between Saudi Arabia and Western powers that kept Amin out of courtrooms, and why some of his family still holds influence in Uganda today. Number 7. Saddam Hussein. He ruled Iraq with an iron fist, using fear, torture, and war to cement his power. But what made Saddam Hussein's brutality stand out? Saddam's rise wasn't just political, it was bloody from the start. After joining the Ba'ath Party, he helped orchestrate assassinations to climb ranks. Once president in 1979, his first act was to purge his own government, forcing officials to watch executions of their colleagues. His secret police tortured dissidents while mass graves filled the deserts. But it wasn't only political enemies who suffered. Saddam launched chemical attacks on Kurdish villages, killing thousands in Halabja in 1988, one of the worst chemical massacres in modern history. He invaded Iran, then Kuwait, triggering 2 wars that devastated the region. Yet through it all, he maintained a bizarre vanity. He commissioned thousands of portraits and monuments of himself, even building a copy of ancient Babylon with his name inscribed on every brick. And here's a chilling twist. Saddam's novel, Zabiba and the King, became a bestseller in Iraq, though few dared criticize it. If you stay with me, I'll tell you how that book secretly mirrored Saddam's vision for absolute power, and the hidden propaganda buried in its pages. Number 6. Kim Il-sung. He created a dynasty and a cult so powerful, people still cry at his statues. But what terrifying secrets built Kim Il-sung's North Korea? He ruled North Korea from its birth in 1948 until his death in 1994, establishing one of the world's most isolated regimes. Under his leadership, the country became a militarized state with an almost religious worship of his image. Every home required his portrait on the wall, cleaned daily by law. But behind the facade of unity was mass starvation, prison camps, and political purges. Historians estimate that hundreds of thousands died in gulags for offenses as small as criticizing the regime. In 1950, Kim launched the Korean War, sparking a bloody conflict that killed millions and left the peninsula divided. And here's something eerie. Kim rewrote history textbooks to claim he personally won the war, despite China's crucial role. Even today, North Koreans are taught that he created the world's greatest nation. If you stick with me, I'll tell you how Kim's bizarre Juche ideology trapped generations in poverty, and why his family's grip on power remains nearly unbreakable, decades after his death. Number 5. Genghis Khan. He built the largest land empire in history, but left entire cities reduced to ashes. How did Genghis Khan turn conquests into terror? Born as Temujin, Genghis Khan united Mongol tribes through brutal warfare and brilliant strategy. His army swept across Asia, conquering from China to Europe. But his victories came at an unimaginable human cost. Some estimates say his campaigns killed up to 40 million people. In cities that resisted, entire populations were massacred, men, women, children alike. One Persian city reportedly lost 90% of its inhabitants after defying him. Yet here's what surprises many. Genghis implemented a code of laws promoting religious freedom and trade across his empire. His rule brought the Silk Road under one banner, boosting commerce. But defy him, and destruction followed swiftly. His enemies feared not just death, but erasure from history. He ordered historians to wipe out entire family records of those who opposed him. If you stick around, I'll tell you about the strange legend surrounding his burial, how thousands of soldiers supposedly diverted rivers to hide his grave, and why no one's ever found it. Number 4. Pol Pot. He promised a perfect society, but instead turned Cambodia into a graveyard. What kind of leader kills his own intellectuals? Pol Pot led the Khmer Rouge in one of the most horrifying genocides of the 20th century. After taking control in 1975, he declared Year Zero, erasing all culture, religion, and institutions. Cities were emptied. People were forced into labor camps. Simply wearing glasses could get you executed for being too educated. Over 1.7 million Cambodians died in just 4 years. That's nearly a quarter of the population wiped out by starvation, torture, and mass executions. Pol Pot banned money, shut down schools, and murdered anyone with foreign ties or even soft hands. Children were turned into soldiers, families were torn apart, Yet Pol Pot lived freely in the jungle for years after his fall, dying in 1998, never seeing trial. And here's the haunting part. Some Khmer Rouge leaders later served in the Cambodian government. Stick with me because I'll reveal how survivors still live beside their former tormentors and why the world stayed silent for so long. Number 3. Mao Zedong. He was idolized like a god, yet his policies killed more than both world wars combined. So why is Mao Zedong still celebrated? Mao ruled China with visionary slogans and an iron will, but his so-called revolutions led to catastrophic human suffering. The Great Leap Forward, 1958 to 1962, aimed to modernize China's economy, but ended in the worst man-made famine in history. Over 30 million people starved. Villagers were forced to melt pots and pans into useless steel. Meanwhile, false production reports hid the truth until it was too late. Then came the Cultural Revolution, a decade of chaos where students turned against teachers, temples were smashed, and intellectuals were tortured. Mao's Red Guards ruled the streets. Families denounced each other. Some were buried alive, and yet Mao's image remained on every wall, his little red book held like a Bible. If you stick with me, I'll show you how his legacy still shapes Chinese policy, and why some citizens still can't question his name publicly, even decades after his death. Number 2. Joseph Stalin. He rose from a poor priest's son to the man of steel, but left millions buried in mass graves. How did Stalin turn paranoia into policy? Joseph Stalin ruled the Soviet Union with absolute power from the 1920s until 1953. His reign saw rapid industrialization, but at an unimaginable human cost. Through forced collectivization, millions of peasants were stripped of land, leading to the Holodomor famine, where over 3.5 million Ukrainians starved to death. Yet Stalin denied the famine even existed, sealing off villages as people died in their homes. Then came the Great Purge, a terrifying campaign where Stalin executed or imprisoned anyone he viewed as a threat. Entire families vanished overnight. Even his closest allies weren't safe. Some confessed to crimes under brutal torture. Stalin's gulags held over 18 million prisoners, many never returning. And yet his image loomed large. Statues, songs, portraits everywhere. If you stick with me, I'll tell you about the secret files declassified after his death, revealing betrayals so deep they shocked even Soviet historians. Number 1. Adolf Hitler. He promised greatness, delivered genocide. But how did Adolf Hitler's lies spiral into the deadliest war in human history? Hitler's rise seemed impossible. A failed artist, a World War I soldier, suddenly leading Germany into dictatorship. But through fiery speeches and propaganda, he won over a desperate nation. Once in power, he swiftly dismantled democracy, banned opposition, and targeted Jews, disabled people, Roma, and others under Nazi racial ideology. By 1939, Hitler invaded Poland, launching World War II, engulfing the world in chaos. The Holocaust followed. 6 million Jews systematically murdered in ghettos, camps, and gas chambers. Yet many Germans believed his lies about enemies everywhere. His ambition stretched too far with the invasion of the Soviet Union. Millions died on both sides. Even in his final days, holed up in a Berlin bunker, Hitler ordered doomed offensives. And here's a haunting twist. Many of his top aides escaped justice for decades, quietly living in South America. Stick with me, because I'll reveal how Nazi hunters uncovered shocking identities hiding in plain sight, even 50 years after the war. Stick with me, because I'll reveal how Nazi hunters uncovered shocking identities hiding in plain sight, even 50 years after the war. History remembers their cruelty, but only we can learn from it. If you want more dark truths and untold stories, hit subscribe and join us for the next shocking chapter.